Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It is a happy Friday, not just because it's Friday, but this day, like every other day, is a day made by King Jesus. He is sitting on the throne, reigning over heaven and earth, bringing about his will, crushing his enemies, raising up kingdoms, tearing down kingdoms, building his church, filling his people with his spirit, blessing us, showing his favor to us. Big things, little things, cup of coffee, marriages, engagements, children, grandchildren. He is so good. So, friends, rejoice. Be glad in this day. That's a command from the Word of God. So let's do that. Rejoice. Be glad. I'm going to have a sip of coffee in celebration. So good. So there's a lot going on, huh? I'm curious. I saw a poll. I think might have been on CNN. Anyway, somebody, maybe several people, polled the whatever groups I do, and they were astonished at how few people cared about the Epstein stuff. I'm sure you all know about it. I'm curious. Here, I'll do my own little poll. How many of you are constantly checking the news, social media, that kind of thing, to see what the latest is versus, don't really care? If you just give me a quick comment, care a lot, or maybe care, don't care, something like that. I'm just curious where most of you are. For me, it is. It's important. I think it's important on several levels. Um, but I tell you, after what came out last night, and apparently what's going to be released today, unsealing the grand jury documents, I I couldn't help but just wonder: has this all been a play? So when Elon Musk left Doge, and that was required. That wasn't a parting of the ways or anything. That was required. He immediately posted something against the big beautiful bill and said that Trump is on the Epstein list. Just wait, it'll come out. And that my first reaction was, this is a play. These two are in this together and they're up to something. And then when Musk began really hammering the big beautiful bill, I thought, okay, no, must not be, because that's too big of a risk, right? If they were in on something together, trying to stir something up, in other words, they're play acting about their rift. That was too big of a risk that Musk might influence some Congress folks to not vote for the big beautiful bill. I thought, okay, that can't be. And it just, the whole thing seemed strange. But then every time Trump talked about it, he talked about the electric vehicle subsidies, which, and he said that's the reason that Elon was upset, which didn't make any sense because Elon knew that was coming. They talked about it a long time ago. That seemed unlikely to me. So the whole thing just seemed so weird. And then, of course, last week when Trump, calls it a hoax and there's no there and all this, and you're thinking, what in the world's going on? And everybody's freaking out. But then last night, when Trump says he's instructed the attorney general to release the grand jury documents, and immediately Pam Bondi responded, says, yes, we'll do that tomorrow. That was too soon for it to just be spontaneous. And then when, what's her name? Is it Luna? I think there's a representative. Her name is Luna. Last name's Luna. She came out with something that said this has been going on behind the scenes. And I just woke up this morning thinking, what if my original thought was right? This is all just a big game to stir up all the Democrats on this, and there's something significant with the Epstein files that's going to come out, and Trump's just been playing everybody. I don't know. Elon Musk is the one that said a couple of years ago that the most entertaining outcome is the most likely. This would certainly be the most entertaining. Can you imagine? I mean, we would be talking about this for generations if Trump and Musk together laid this trap for the Democrats to clamor. So now it can't be put in the terms of lawfare and going after his political enemies if he roused the interest of all the left and they were demanding that he release the Epstein files. So I don't know. It still seems unlikely that that's what's going on, but oh, what a masterful play that would be if it is. And it's not funny. Everything about it is serious if there's anything there, but I can't stop chuckling about it. I want it to be that from a pure entertainment value. All right. So Megan says, meh, trying to stay mildly informed. Sana says, I'm not, but my husband tracks it pretty closely. Kathy doesn't care much. Christian, I don't hang out on the news, but I care for truth and justice. Jim is not sure yet. Well, Jim, you got to be sure whether you care or not, right? Aaron says, I care, matter of justice, less so the particulars. Christian says, I don't hang out on the news, but weird that came in twice. John is with Christian. Trump is the master of the art of the deal. Yeah, and this would not only be art of the deal, this would be art of war level manipulation and just politically speaking, just destroying his enemy. Interesting. So I think you're probably a fair representation of my interpretation from others that I know, that men seem to be more interested in this than women. And I can't help but wonder if some of our attraction to it as men is that warfare, that battle, strategic element of this. I don't know. So we'll see where it all plays out. I would be somewhat surprised if it's all a play, but I sure want it to be in some ways. I don't know. That's just crazy. So it actually does play into or move towards something else I wanted to talk about today. The Department of Education. That's a big deal. The Supreme Court basically gave Trump the right, or agreed that he has the right as the chief executive to, for all intents and purposes, dismantle the Department of Education, which I've been saying for years in small, inner circles, that our Department of Education and the teachers unions, if we could get rid of them, it changes everything for the better. And it really is happening. I don't know how many of you have watched my series on cultural Marxism. It was back when I was still pastoring in a traditional church, and it was 2020, and all the stuff was coming out, and I took that summer of 2020 and taught basically for several weeks on cultural Marxism, trying to show that a lot of what was happening with the BLM and all of that was not directly related to COVID, but to the Marxists. It was part of their strategy. And I think I've been proven right on that. I talked about in one of those sermons, I don't know if sermon is the right word. I wasn't preaching the Bible, obviously, but one of those lessons, and you can find it on our YouTube page on crosstricon.org as well, but it's a playlist. I think it's called Understanding the Times. Yeah, I'm sure it is called Understanding the Times. Have any of you watched it? Any of you? I know some people in the past have mentioned it, said it was helpful for them to think through some things politically and culturally. Anyway, Antonio Gramsci was a guy in the Frankfurt School, if any of that means anything to you, a Marxist, and there their objective switched from just an economic disruption and trying to cause a rebellion of the working class against the elite kind of thing. When they realized that wasn't working because capitalism was actually very satisfying in America and in the West, they switched to seeking to create a backlash from the oppressed class. So this is way oversimplified, but basically Marxism said the oppressed class is the working class, and they are going to rebel against those who own the tools and the managers and the leaders, and destroy that group, and then we'll have utopia kind of thing. And when that didn't play out because people were prospering, the Marxists had to create an oppressed class. This is why we have the repeated emphasis on racism. I mean, think about what DEI is. It is racism institutionalized and legalized. Well, we'll see if it's legalized. There have been some lawsuits that have been won, and there may be more. And that's why all these corporations are quickly eliminating their DEI platforms, because now the left doesn't control the Department of Justice anymore. Anyway, so starting with Obama, the repeated really attempt to create racism. They have to, in order to create an oppressed class. So, and that's also why the repeated emphasis on heterosexual versus homosexual and feminism. Basically the white Christian, able-bodied, heterosexual man is the oppressor, and every other group is the oppressed. And that's all been created from this cultural Marxist philosophy. Well, Antonio Gramsci talked about the long march through the institutions, that they were going to destroy America slowly over time and get into the four robes: the clergy and the university professors and the justices and Congress. Because in various settings, all four of those institutions are symbolized by wearing robes, like graduation ceremony at the universities and so on. And think about what they've done. Think about those four institutions. They have certainly infiltrated the clergy and swept through with liberalism, and again emphasizing the hostility against homosexuals as they see it, and minorities and so on, creating disturbances and trying to eradicate. They've gotten into almost every mainline denomination of Christianity has had a major liberal influx, which led to weakening and destruction and separation and that kind of thing. Judges. I mean, we have a few of our Supreme Court justices, and certainly many lower judges, that are just absurdly anti-Constitution and liberal and Marxist, basically. University professors, that may be where the biggest gain has been, and then of course so many on the left, politicians, and probably some on the right. Well, when you think about education, so anyway, the point of all that is what's happening right now. The Trump administration is exposing and defanging the Marxist push into virtually all of those. I think in 4 years, we could really see a totally different United States, which will then lead to a totally different world. And cultural Marxism could be, if not destroyed, could be so weakened that it'll take generations for it to come back. I'm impressed and pleased and thankful to the Lord for what's happening. Well, in particular, the Department of Education. So and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. If basically the Department of Education is reduced to almost nothing, and so that each state controls its own educational approach, right? It's not a federal issue anymore, but it's pushed to the states. Have you considered the implications of that? And I'm talking not only in theory, but if you have children, grandchildren, if you are younger and hope to get married someday and have children. I mean, this is real world impact stuff. And you need to be thinking about this. And for someone like me, I'm a first principles guy. I'm a kind of guy that says, let's strip this all the way down to the basics and see what the implications are, and then, try to rebuild a better way. So let's play this out a little bit. Megan says, Lord willing, we'll get someone in office after Trump who keeps it up. Yeah, and I think if what some of the commentators are saying, that with deportations and the left being sort of dismantled, their popularity has never been this low, I don't think. At least it's been a long time. Yeah, I think future elections look really good. Now it's early, obviously. Sana says, not sure it would impact homeschoolers, although maybe there would be less of that. Maybe. Aaron says, we homeschool. I just want the state to leave us alone. Too much to ask in Minnesota, though. Yeah, in Colorado, we're further left than you are. But, okay, so let me take it this direction, because we homeschooled our children, and I've been thinking about it from that perspective, and knowing, my grandchild, and Lord willing, more grandchildren in the near future. Just been thinking through on their behalf as well. All right, so let's go this far first. If it's left to the states, then yeah, Tony, I think you're exactly right. School choice is going to be the way forward in many states. Florida will probably lead the charge. Texas, maybe. Maybe some other southern states will do this well. Open up for school choice. And although I still don't like the idea of the government giving money back to citizens for education, I would prefer they don't take it in the first place, which also could happen. I mean, with the tariff stuff, Trump said the other day that eliminating the IRS is not out of the possibility realm. And maybe what he said on the campaign trail of eliminating income tax for, who knows where this could go. But we'll just go with the system as given right now. So if now you are given money back from the government to put toward education, then that's good for you as homeschoolers and any other pursuit. But some of the better states, more conservative, free states like Florida, there's going to be more competition, which is always a good thing. So we schooled at home for a variety of reasons. High on the list was, I don't want a government school impacting my children 40 hours a week. And I knew what I wanted to do with our kids in terms of educating them. However, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, and some of you were aware of it. I think it was a school in Texas where they're using AI for a couple hours a day. Student-directed curriculum basically created by AI in the moment, and then the rest of the day they're learning other skills on a farm. Do you all remember that? I forget now what it's called. But there is something like that very attractive to me. I like the idea of children having a larger group of kids to learn with, especially if they're learning life skills. So for me, the homeschooling was not opposed to any kind of group education. It's just that the options were awful. I mean, the government schools, by definition, they were atheistic and evolutionary. And Christian schools, for the most part, I couldn't stomach having my kids being taught by these Christian schools that what I knew of them were not. That's not the Christian influence I wanted my kids to have. But a combination of so-called homeschooling and this other institution I was just describing, this on the farm with the AI and all that. I don't know. There's something very attractive to me about that, especially if parents are involved, right? So you're not just sending your kids over there and trusting someone else, but if parents are involved in that, there's something really, really intriguing to me about that. And I think that kind of thing, and that's just one iteration. They're on the cutting edge, so to speak. If we get true competition, and competition may not be the right word. Let's not make it so, antagonistic almost. That's what competition kind of raises. But the idea of people who really care about education, mirroring or pairing that with technology, AI in particular, and so on. Oh, just think of the creative ways we could approach it. And as Aaron mentioned, and I said here in Colorado, we're even more liberal than Minnesota. Eventually, I'm convinced if some of those states do it well, it will put pressure on Colorado, for instance, and eventually the left will lose their control here as well. That's what I'm hopeful for. I think that's what free market does. And eventually Colorado will vote out the commies, so to speak, and we'll be a little behind the curve, but it wouldn't take that long to get back into play. So I think this is massive. I am so thankful for what's happening with Department of Education. And I think this could have major impact down the road. All right, let me catch up on your comments. Then I have one other thought here. Dean says, is it better to be misinformed or uninformed? Well, half the battle these days is figuring out which is which, isn't it? Jim says, states taking care of these issues would be the best solution. That's what the founders wanted. I agree, so long as this, there's still the possibility of states doing this poorly. But that's why I say long term, I think a Marxist approach at a state level, when you have other states thriving, will make it more difficult. Megan says, school choice, including homeschooling, is the way to go. Education shouldn't be mandated from federal government. Yep, agreed. Sana says, the American school system has been terrible and incompetent for a very long time. Indeed. It can only go up. Dale says, I was educated in the Catholic school system many years ago. I see now that it was better than public schools. Interesting. Sana says, I grew up in Holland. Vast difference. So was it better in Holland? And if so, what can you articulate in just a sentence or two what made it better? Aaron says, homeschool co-ops and micro schools are both attempts at combining homeschool type of parental control and involvement with a group setting and sometimes instructors. Yeah, I agree that the challenge there so often is, and this is where the money comes in, right? You're paying taxes, but in some states, it's hard to get any of that money back for the co-ops and so on. And then there's the whole discussion of, women working, and so are mothers able to be part of this, and so on, which is, there's more to it than what we're talking about here, but it all kind of fits together. But I just think the possibilities open up for some really great approaches. Megan says, whole family learning new skills together, win, agreed. Tony says, don't understand those teachers unions. Yeah, it's basically just a bunch of people getting rich off of our taxes and making sure that teachers are teaching God-hating curriculum. Making it very hard to do otherwise. Jim says, if the state does it bad, you can move, though. True. true, that can be very tough, for a lot of people. If you have family and other structures here. Sona says, I do believe so. It is much more academic. We actually learn stuff, and you have a variety of levels for varying levels of book smarts. Okay, cool. Holland has school choice. Sana says it's going downhill there too. Yeah, I mean, this whole leftist approach has infiltrated most nations. All right, so here's a question to be thinking about through all of this, and this gets back to the the first principles approach. What are we trying to accomplish? So Sana mentioned that Holland had a more academic approach, and she actually learned something there. What are we trying to accomplish in education? Sana says, graduating from high school, at least when I did, was equivalent to a 2-year college degree. Yeah, there's no question it has been dumbed down significantly. I mean, many of our PhDs today wouldn't make it through high school of 300 years ago. Aaron says, we also suffer because we're begging to view education as a commodity rather than a lifelong lifestyle. So that's kind of getting at what I'm raising here. It's easy to just go with the system, whether it's homeschool for good reasons, like I stated, or you just kind of fall in line and you send your kids to the government school, or you decide, no, we're not going to do that, but we're going to pay the money and send them to a private Christian school or whatever. What are we trying to do? Right? If you can't answer that question, then how can you possibly make a choice about how you're going to do it? If you can't answer that question, what are we trying to accomplish? It doesn't really matter how you do it, right? What is the goal? And no doubt there will be a lot of different answers to that question, even from the group here. But it's the first question that has to be answered. And then you figure out how to approach it. And I think it's worth all of us taking some time to answer that question. As we've talked many times, technology is going to change so much. We've talked about for work, for instance, learning a trade maybe, or at least if you're in a more technical environment, you have to be familiar with AI in most settings because you're going to need to use it. And if you can't use it, you may find yourself without a job or at the low end of the totem pole with, hard to move up. Then there are a lot of jobs that AI and robotics are many, many, many years away, if ever, from doing. It's hard for me to fathom a robot being a plumber, although it's certainly possible that plumbing could change. So anyway, I'll save that discussion for another time. But what are we trying to do with education? Aaron, you said you all are homeschooling. What's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish as you school your children at home? Can you articulate it in a sentence or two? I'm sure you won't be surprised to learn that I've asked this question many times over the years to parents from all different perspectives, and very few of them have answers, which is part of the reason why we are where we are. Right? For generations, we had the system where you sent your kids to school, you trusted the experts, you believed what they told you of the need and importance of getting at least a high school education, and then now it's pretty much assumed you need a college education, although that certainly is weakening now, thankfully. But if you ask parents even a few years ago, 10, 20 years ago, why, they might have a hard time answering the question. Aaron says, develop critical thinking and a biblical worldview, be able to interact with the world from that baseline. I like that. Sana says, I would love for it to instill in them a love for learning. That doesn't always translate, though. Jim says, to think. Yeah, good. And I don't think there is, just one right answer or one articulation of it. For me, it was to teach our children how to think, how to learn, rather. Sorry, I was thinking about Jim's statement there. Our goal, and this, I think Aaron and I probably have a similar view in this sense. I didn't look at homeschooling as a distinction from raising my children. It was just one aspect of raising my children. And in that aspect, when it came to, I think there are, some subjects that are very important to learn, at least rudimentarily, math, which helps with logic. And if any of my kids had gone down an engineering field or anything like that, you need to have good math. They need to learn to read and read all sorts of different types of literature and so on. Articulation, that's the typical reading, writing, arithmetic, learn how to express their point of view, be persuasive and rational as they, they learn, and then they articulate that kind of thing. But my goal on that element, the sort of academic element, if my kids grew up able to learn whatever they wanted to learn and to communicate what they had learned, then I counted that as a success. I didn't care if they, remembered the quadratic formula or Pythagorean theorem or, anything like that, or could remember everything every book they read or whatever. But if they were equipped as they moved into adulthood to pursue any field of study and learn, I did my job. That's what I wanted for them. And they have. And now they are learning more than ever in their 20s, and are equipped to do that. They're good thinkers, and they know how to learn, how to study, how to learn what, and not just memorize for a test, but actually learn a subject and that kind of thing. But again, that's just one aspect of my job in raising them to obey the Lord, which is really what all of it is about. But also, as you hear me say all the time, to learn to live in this world and enjoy his good things and be useful for others. And that has only a small part of that is a traditional academic pursuit. Tenenbaugh Lux says Marxist Christians. Not sure what that means. Not sure there is such a thing. Aaron says the lessons in homeschooling are handled in 1 to 2 hours per day, but the actual learning continues throughout the day in various contexts. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I almost feel sad sometimes, and I know some of you are in this situation, kids going to school from 7:30 till 4 or whatever. And I think, our kids, their formal schooling time was certainly done before lunch. And that was after, we would sit down at breakfast table at 7:30, and I'd spend an hour and a half with them reading, and we'd be singing some and talking about the Bible or logic or whatever. So yeah, a couple hours was plenty. Anyway, I think the reverberations of the Department of Education and what Trump is doing there, I think they're going to be significant. And I would encourage you just for your own thinking, but especially if you have young kids or hope to have young kids, give this some thought and answer to the first question: what are we trying to accomplish with any kind of formal education? And let that spill into your decisions, into your voting, into participating at all in decision making at any level. And for some of us, maybe the opportunity will raise itself to be part of a creative approach to these things. I don't know. My mind has been stirring a bit. I don't have young children of my own to think this through for, but I'd love to help others. So anyway, it's important and worth giving some thought to. So pay attention to what's going on in the U.S. because it will have impact around the world, and then give some thought. But first, answer the question: what should we be trying to accomplish with education? All right, we're going to leave it there. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you back here Monday to continue our study of Matthew. Grace and peace to you.